lifestyles which does not reflect the taxes that they pay. So the others also, we get to know them through registration of properties. In the lands office, they acquire property in different ways, although majority of these properties acquired through proxies. They can use children, their family members, or even non-related people to register some of this property. Many high net worth individuals are involved in sophisticated tax planning schemes. Others just do outright tax evasion. A lot of schemes that reflect entitlement and political connection. So taxation is on income and not wealth. So you will find somebody very wealthy, but you can't go and tax the wealth unless a transaction is triggered, like for example, if they choose to dispose of some of this wealth. They file no returns and therefore limited use of available data or desire to profile high net worth by URA staff. It's really a tough job to get a fair share of tax from these people. They are highly a cash economy. They prefer cash transactions. So you'll find that interactions with banks, Financial Intelligence Authority, the central bank may be very, very important, and also the telecoms. Many of them transact through mobile money transactions. It's an area that we need to also look at. If you are able to look at the mobile money transactions that go through these people's accounts, then it can be a good way in which we can also be able to fairly get the revenue that has come through their hands. So the other one way is through the Financial Intelligence Authority, and then the banks. The banks have been very elusive in giving us information about their clients. They cite confidentiality. We recently lost a case where URA had written to the banks to share all the bank details for all their customers. So they took us to court, and they were like, this cannot work. You cannot ask for an omnibus request. So now we have to do a one-on-one case. But even then, that free will for the banks to help us becomes very, very difficult. Some rich Ugandans like to flaunt their wealth. We observe their lifestyles. Others really try to portray a very modest, and yet the lifestyle doesn't speak to the wealth that you have. Exchange of information is also another way, and use of digitalization. Third-party transaction sources to acquire information on purchases, etc., can help us, especially in trying to assess these people and getting their worth. How much is this person really worth in terms of tax? Tax is supposed to be fair, equitable, and a good tool to redistribute wealth in an economy. So this is what we are looking for. So collaboration with the central bank through tracking of payments received is something very, very important. We did some benchmarking with South Africa last year, and we realized that their high net worth had also picked up so well. And most of the information they were getting was through transactions, cross-border transactions. These high net worth individuals are investing in offshore countries. They are investing internally, in country, but through proxies. So you need a lot of intelligence. Financial Intelligence Authority also helps us track undeclared individual bank accounts or those high-value bank accounts and share with us. And even with the central bank, we are looking at an interface between the central bank and the Uganda revenue systems so that we are able to get some information on some of those transactions. Ministry of Lands works closely with us and the government chief valuer in supporting us get some of the information on high value transactions. You can just imagine how some individuals can have huge volumes of money. If you've been watching the news very closely, just this year in Kenya, one of the pastors, there was some scandal on how a pastor killed so many people through spiritual things. Spirituality is something no one can understand and no one can explain. But when this pastor was investigated further, the money in his account was a lot. So all these followers would just take all the money there, and they knew they were going to heaven or to another world. So they sell all their assets and give this guy the money. And this guy banks all the money. So yesterday in the presentation, how would you name this money? Is it employment income? Is it business income? We really need to research around this area. And I promised myself we must think on how best we need to get a law specifically to pick this money and tax it. So the financial sector, the commercial banks should also help us. Transactions on bankings, transactions on mortgages are a very important source for us to get or to trace these individuals. Uganda Registration Services Bureau, track of information on shareholding of companies. We have systems now. If you just put a TIN or a name, it will run you all these other companies. And you will be able to see how this taxpayer is worth. But however, this is becoming now a hiding way of some of these taxpayers. So they now use proxies in businesses. They don't put their names. So there is no universal definition for high net worth individuals. Each tax administration globally defines them differently, depending on their economic indicators. At the inception of the high net worth concept, URA defined this type of individuals using the following parameters. One was having significant shareholding or directorship in companies with a turnover of 50 billion. So then we pick him out. Having net investable assets of 1 billion Uganda shillings. The exchange rate of Uganda shillings is 1 Uganda shilling is 3,700. I mean, $1 is 3,700 Uganda shillings. The value of our currency is a bit low compared to Tanzania. Undertake bank transactions of at least 1 billion in a year. If you are able to do transactions in a bank, total transaction in and out of $1 billion, then we pick you out as a high net worth. Or obtain bank loans of at least 5 billion over a 5-year period. Many of this money is hidden through bank loans. And you know, the taxpayer keeps saying, no, I'm servicing loans, servicing loans. If you are in business, how would you service these loans? Have land transactions of at least 1 billion for buyer and seller who is in the business of selling and buying land. Sudden wealth inheritance, sale of land, compensation, etc. But monitor business life cycle, which includes creation, building, and sustaining of wealth. It's important to monitor some of these. And rental income of at least 500 million a year. By the time you earn 500 million a year, the value of the wealth is quite substantial. Own a home of over $1 billion. I told you how some of the musicians own really serious homes. And then own a motor vehicle valued at 500. Make imports of at least 1 billion a year. So again, we collaborate some of this information with customs information. So that is the trend of the taxes that we collected so far. Like indicated earlier on by our moderator, personal income tax really is the most abused tax globally, and especially in Africa, sub-Saharan Africa. So we get a very small portion of income tax coming from these people. And if you look at the way it has been moving, from 17 billion in 2019, 20, 75, 20, 21. Why 75 was because there was a disposal capital gains tax. In Uganda, we don't have a separate regime for capital gains tax. When you dispose of an asset, the proceeds are included in your gross income for business. So it is now 28 billion in 21, 22, and then 26 in 22, 23. We hope this year it will grow higher than this, but at a global level, you are looking at some movements because 69 to 72, but very small movement. We've given this team more staff this year, and we think we should now be able to get more tax. We've structured it, given them more staff and technical staff who are confident and can communicate effectively. So rental tax is also there, not growing very well, but will surely pick up. If you look at pay as you earn, it's also not growing quite high. VAT specifically at least moved from 13 billion to 16 billion, and then withholding tax 3.9 to 5 billion in the last 2 years. Non-tax revenue covers things like stamp duty and other fees that they will pay for services. Customs duties also have been growing, but you know customs also is quite abused. They end up using proxies to import just to disguise so that they are not traced. What we have learned, the journey of monitoring these individuals has been tough, and a lot of lessons learned from which we draw initiatives and interactions on a daily basis. Once found on the wrong side, they want their matters held in secret. Once you get them, and getting them means you have the facts and you can show the provision of the law that mandates you to tax them. Then they will tell you, now let's handle it secretly. Of course, we do this confidentially because tax information should be confidential. You give them a payment program to pay. They pay for about a few months and then they stop paying, then you have to go and look for them. It's really not an easy job. They feel catered for when you visit and call them for a reminder. But even the person who calls them is very, very important. In June again, one of the officers sent an email to a high-profile VIP who works in government. And when that person saw the email and the person who had sent, she immediately called the Commissioner General. Who is this contacting me over my rental affairs? So the Commissioner General called me and said, Sarah, who called this person? Then I told him, let me check. So now I had to transfer now that one again from the small office to large taxpayers to be handled in a VIP way. So those are the things that you have to interface on a daily basis. They will freely contribute in times of revenue mobilization when politely asked to make upfront payments. Some of them are very, very good, especially the businessmen who are investors. If you have gotten a relationship with them and you tell them in June, we are doing badly with our target, please, can you pay upfront by these billions? They will pay if they are in good moods. So their mood also affects taxation. So they offer tip-offs to their peers in a way to share the burden of taxation. They deny nearly every finding until proof is presented to them. They will deny everything until you show the bank transaction. You got this money, see the bank transaction. They can even deny that. So it is. Their designated accounts and auditors have at times misled them. Like this particular one whom I met in the golf course, he was not paying stamp duty on transactions. He transfers, connives with the Ministry of Lands, they transfer without paying any stamp duty. So when they called the accountant, who is a lawyer, he didn't seem to explain things properly, yet he was the one helping the guy to transact. So those are the challenges that we have. They don't know what to do most of the time. They even don't know the law. Tax is the least in their priorities as they do business. So they only wake up to a surprise that they have to pay tax. They want tax waivers for taxes, especially where interest has been accumulated. So they sleep on tax. When we wake them up and tell them this is the principal, this is the interest, they now write to the ministry for waivers. They deliberately conceal sources of income so that they don't pay a fair share of tax. So these are the people that we have to get a fair share of tax coming through, but it's an uphill task. In my office, we have picked two journalists who are also tax people to help us see through all the available media on a daily and report to us these transactions of these high net worth individuals. So what does that mean? That you will not just get the information about these individuals coming so easily. You have to look through all the different types of information channels to get information. But largely, what we can say is that they are honestly not paying a fair share of tax, but the journey is a long journey, but we now start moving. The more they engage them, the more they will be able to support. But even the engagements have to be very calculative. Persuasion, trying to really show them that they are part of this revenue mobilization agenda. This is our country. Let's be patriotic. Let's pay taxes to grow our country. You are one of the largest taxpayers. We have taxpayer appreciation weeks every year. And we give them, a few of them, some rewards. Now, if you give others, the other one will want the following year. So you tell them, you see, this one pays this amount of tax. You also put up your tax. And it's good for them because, you know, when government sees that you are also paying a fair share of tax, then you become a serious investor. So thank you so much for listening to me. I want to say, let's share experiences, and to thank Ataf and the Africa Tax Research Network for organizing this. Thank you, and webale.
Thank you very much, Commissioner, and for that very, very informative presentation. I'm sure the audience enjoyed it as much as I did. And listening to you, when you spoke about the MP, I started wondering, is Sarah still welcome in Uganda, or do we have to ask Richard to get him Tanzanian nationality? But thank you. I think it's very interesting, and it gives you an indication, especially for those who were in the session yesterday in the afternoon. The ideas that Sarah just shared with us are very similar. It's a sector that is very difficult to tax because it's very difficult to determine where the source of the revenue is coming from. Secondly, they are very highly connected politically. And actually, in Sarah's case, it's the politicians who are doing it. And the example that you used from the other parts of the region. So it is clear that this is a hard-to-tax sector. But from what she said, using the soft power and other soft skills, URA has been able to make strides. So Sarah, well done. And from what you're saying, I think the high net worth individuals in Uganda are getting a run for their money, and you're not letting them off. And so when you were speaking, I realized that there are a couple of things that you might want to clarify. And I'll give you an opportunity to do just that. But before we get to you, and just to let you catch your breath, I want to ask Giovanni a few questions. Giovanni, you've done extensive research on the continent on high net worth individuals. What are the key common challenges that you have found out in your research that have made taxing high net worth individuals in Africa difficult?
Thank you very much, Mary, and thank you very much to the Atrn to having me here. It's a very tough job to go under the commissioner. She pretty much preempted everything that I could have said. So I'm going to try and link as much as I can to many of the great points that she made. I think that, in the many pieces of work that we have done as ICTD, and we are blessed to have a very good working relationship with the URA, with the KRA, with the RRA, with a lot of revenue authorities, we saw that usually the type of obstacle existing can be categorized under three different headings. One set of obstacle that have to do with the actual process of tax administration.
Can you hear Giovanni? Just use this one.
Okay. One set of obstacle has to do with the legal and policy framework, and then the bigger set of obstacle has to do with the political appeal of pursuing this individual. When it, for the tax administration obstacle, I think that something that needs to be recognized, and that was recognized yesterday also by our colleague from Togo that was on the panel, is that a lot of work has been directed by most revenue authorities over the last decade in cleaning data from corporate entities. The vast majority of enforcement effort in systematizing the tax return data and digitizing it has not been directed to individual taxpayers. So that when it comes to try and access all the information required to identify the sources of income of this individual, the data sometimes is simply not there. We have worked in countries in which there is no systematized data on personal income taxes, no systematized data on capital gains taxes, and very little data on many withholding taxes. This is not to say that the data does not exist, but the data might be held in hard copies, might be held in a variety of spreadsheets that are only intelligible to a few members of the authority, and this is not a way of keeping data that allows for matching it with that from the many other government institutions and private sector institutions who holds relevant information. The other things that, again, the commissioner mentioned quite a few times is the importance of the skill set of the staff of revenue authorities. Again, recognizing that there has been a lot of improvement in the available human capacity across the continent, there still are particular functions, such as audit function, that are not as capacitated as it will be required to really pursue the tax matters of a net worth individual, as well as interacting with them. And as we've heard many times, that might require going to golf courses of receiving email or calls from high-up politicians that ask why has this person been handled in this way. So there is a very different set of skills that is required to simply send an email to a high net worth individuals, and these are not always present. On the legal and policy framework, the first things that comes to mind is are all the economic exchanges that matter for high net worth individuals being defined as taxable event in the legal framework of a country. Now, in all the countries we have worked, the legal framework is very good. There are provision for income taxes, from withholding of rent, of dividends, of interest, of directorship fees, capital gains taxes are there. So that does not really seem to be an issue in itself in the vast majority of countries we work, and we suspected in the vast majority of countries. What is less frequent, though, is the obligation of file information returns. And information returns can be a very important source of information for revenue authorities to gather the type of, of figures required to understand where this income is coming from. For tax stamp duties, for conveyances, for withholding from professional fees, all of this type of income tax return should have information forms attached to it. And these are not often exploited to the extent that they could. There's some issues that have to do with again, the data sharing across government entities and between government entities and private sector. We've heard about the complexity of getting data from commercial banks. And again, this is something we hear literally in every country in which we worked. So does the law have any provision for automatic exchange of information within the country from the commercial banks? Is it easy for the revenue authorities to get data from the Corporate Affairs Commission, from the Ministry of Land? Are there processes in place, or must every single time the Commissioner General send a letter to the Director General of the other entity asking for the specific things? When this information is freely available on a regular basis, it makes the work of the commissioner much easier than having to every single time send an email or get in contact with someone. The final and, admittedly biggest obstacle, it's something that was also in one of the final slides of the commissioner, and is there the will to profile this individual, right? These individuals are the most highly connected people in the country. They are very often politicians, as we have heard, and if they're not politicians, they are politically exposed. They have the capacity of making a phone call and having someone high up calling whoever is trying to do enforcement activity on them, and sometimes telling them to stop outright. We've heard a story yesterday from, I think, a colleague from South Africa that was mentioning that an investigation team had been fired because they did not obey to the order of stop investigating a particular individual. Now, this, again, is not a unique story. This happens quite often. So without the presence of a strong political will in the government, in the cabinet, at the very top of most government bodies, it is simply impossible to pursue these individuals. And because many of those individuals are sitting in those cabinets, are sitting in those upper echelons of government bodies, there has to be a recognition of the value of being taxpayers present in the country. If that is not there, there are many administrative actions that can be taken. One can fix the legal system if there's something lacking, but the political will really is the base of everything, I would say.
Thank you so much, Giovanni. And before I move on, I want to pick up from what you just said regarding especially the skill set. And listening to you and knowing that you've worked on a couple of countries, if you compare the research that you've done in the different countries, at what level are there countries that you feel have attained this and are actually taxing these high net worth individuals to a level of that you'd find actually commendable? What can the others learn from it?
I think that, the example from Uganda is definitely a good example. There has been a lot of work that has been directed in capacitating the units looking after the tax affairs of a net worth individual with the correct skill set. There's definitely very good example from South Africa. The South African Revenue Services have been, spearheading this work in the continent, are often used as a benchmark from other institutions. And, there's also, still quite a lack of widespread information on this type of units across the continent. There aren't that many available studies that have really focused, laser tight on the process of working of these units. There is definitely, in my experience, a strong appreciation of the importance of soft skills. This is not something that ever comes as a surprise to those we speak to in revenue authorities, because every single time that an enforcement activity has been attempted, you always get the call you always get the email. And that the other big difference when a revenue authority tries an affirmative action on a medium taxpayer, there's a high likelihood that the business owner will come. A small taxpayer will definitely be the taxpayer itself. A net worth individual will send his lawyer, will send her tax accountant, will not come forwards directly. And then when you speak to one of the biggest lawyer in your country and you are a junior staff member of a revenue authority, you need to have that confidence to hold that.
This. And while you're speaking to it, can you also speak to the issue of interference? Is there interference as well? And again, what do you think?
To express my sincere gratitude to Atrn and Ataf for giving me the opportunity to sit in this panel and to contribute to the discussions of taxation of high net worth individuals. In my opinion, it's a highly important topic to us as African countries as we continue to refine and strengthen our tax administration practices. I would say it is actually perhaps our best hope in enhancing the contribution of personal income tax. So thank you very much for that. But allow me also to make a disclaimer note that whatever I will be sharing here are my own views and may not necessarily represent the official position of TRA. Okay, thank you for that. I think I will first address the question of whether there is potential connected to this concept of high net worth individuals in Tanzania. I'll take your question as one that is seeking to broadly find out whether TRA should worry about high net worth individuals, should pay focused attention to high net worth individuals, and my straightforward answer will be yes. We have to look at this group of taxpayers. Going by the basics of compliance management, I will mention one principle that I think is very, very important, and that is know your customer, KYC. And the immediate question is, do we really know this group of taxpayers, high net worth individuals? Do we know their compliance behavior? Do we know how they create their wealth? Do we know how they generate income? What opportunities do they present in our revenue collection efforts? What challenges do they pose? As long as we don't have 100% sure answers to these questions, I will look at them as a group that represents any element of potential revenue, potential tax base. So we must look at them from that very basic point of view. We need to know them. as a customer group. But if I were to take your question literally, is there potential? Maybe in mind you're thinking of a number. I won't give you a number in terms of the potential revenue we can collect from them, but a number will be represented by the existence of high net worth individuals. Do we have them in Tanzania? And again, I will say the answer is yes. I will refer to a report that we as TRA did some 10 years ago. And the objective was actually to find out whether there could be high net worth individuals in Tanzania worth our attention. So the findings of that report, they actually tell us that the answer is yes. Of course, the report made a lot of reference to the wealth reports. I think one of them was Africa 2013 Wealth Book. And from those reports, the estimate came to around 5,700 high net worth individuals. And yes, I could hear my brother Waiswa getting surprised at the number. Is from those reports. Perhaps when we employ our administrative processes, the number could be different. I'm not too sure about that. But that's the number that came up. And the report even mentioned that within this group of 5,700, there were over 100 which would qualify as ultra high net worth individuals. Yeah, so those from the general definitions whose asset holdings exceed 30 million US dollars. Yeah, so the answer to your question, the potential is there. Now, what are we doing, or what do we want to do? I think to me this is the puzzle. What do we really want to do with this taxpayer segment? Do we want new taxes from them? Or do we want dedicated legislation for them? In my opinion, it is not those two big things. There are no questions of policy, if I may say so. There may not be significant questions of legislation. What I would say we want from them is not big, but it's very important. We want them to pay their fair share of taxes, probably under the existing rules. So to me, it's a question of tax administration more than a question of tax policy, more than a question of tax law. Perhaps I'll stay here, I'll stop here for a start, unless you have more time for me.
Yes, I want to build on what you just said, because as you were speaking, I was thinking, and I agree with you that it's not a question of tax policy. To an extent, yes, because if you see the amount of time and the amount of effort that revenue administrations put into taxing, how to tax the informal sector. And when we talk about the informal sector, we are talking about the people who in East Africa we call juakali. You know, they're very, very medium to lower, businesses. And yet you're talking about this segment that is that large. What is the legal framework like? Is there a legal framework to tax these people? I didn't get that in what you explained. So is it very, very straightforward to facilitate TRA and the taxman to collect this tax? Is that in place?
Okay, thank you. Actually, currently, I would say we don't have a specific piece of legislation that is focused on high net worth individuals. And probably that explains what I'm saying, that the problem is probably more to do with our administration practices than the design of our tax policy and our laws. And I think, in a way, that is what is coming through Sarah's presentation. It's more about what we do in the context of administration. And I will agree with Sarah that we need these two avenues. When these two are fine, then matters to do with the law may be secondary. One is the technical rigor that is involved, which goes with the nature of the challenges that they pose. We are looking at a group that makes their money, creates their wealth, and maybe protects their wealth through very, very complex structures. There will be cross-border arrangements involved, different types of entities involved, and therefore international taxation issues involved. But you're talking about a group that is also that also is capable of being mobile itself. So you disappoint them in Tanzania, tomorrow you find them in Rwanda. So that adds to the complexity. But you're looking at a group that has access to sophisticated tax planning schemes. Yeah, you're looking at a group, we talked a lot about their political affiliations or even their political status themselves, but I will mention here that some of these may also carry celebrity status in society. So your problem will also be one of winning community support in dealing with them. So a very, very complex group indeed, which emphasizes the technical rigor that should be there. So the audits and so on that we have to employ on their affairs, but also the general approach, which points to matters of customer care. And that also came up strongly in Sarah's presentation. So you're talking about people who perhaps, first and foremost, they value their reputation. They feel that they're high-profile people, and then you're sending a tax officer to them. So our approach, our customer care has to pay attention to all of that. And I think if we are able to do it right on these two avenues, there will be little, if any, discussion in the name of designing or redesigning our tax policy and maybe our tax laws as well. Jovan mentioned, and I think in our East African community, talking of income taxation, I think we have some of the best laws, if I may say so. You talk of anti-avoidance rules, which are recommended as one of the responses to the challenges posed by this group. You find we have them. We have general anti-avoidance rules. We have very strong specific anti-avoidance rules as well. So probably the discussion of laws comes second. Thank you very much, Mary.
Thank you so much, Emmanuel. Very interesting, and we could go on listening to you because clearly this is an area that you have thought about and that you are working on. I was thinking when you're talking about the soft skills and how you, this is a very sensitive category. And we saw that this category spans from celebrities to the church, to the politicians. So everywhere you look, they're high net worth individuals, and you have to find a creative way of taxing them. So I want to come to you, Ronald. How do you think tax administrations should handle this in your work, both at Ataf and in your previous work and in the research you have done? How do you think they should be defined, first of all, and how do you think they should be followed up? Do you think there should be a carrot and stick, the soft power versus naming and shaming? How would this work?
Okay. Thank you so much, Mary, for my questions. But also, I'll take this chance to thank the Atrn event team for giving me the opportunity to speak on this subject, which is very interesting, and I'm really interested in it. I've been doing work on HNW since 2015 in Uganda. In fact, in Uganda, we have done like 3 studies. The last study, we were trying to evaluate whether the establishment of a high net worth individual unit actually has had an impact. And then we realized that after some time, the impact of the unit was actually fading away in the sense that URA had laid small nets for big fish. And I'm very happy to hear about the story from the commissioner DT that now the unit is expanded with the manager and supervisors and over 1,600. That's very encouraging. Because before, the unit started with about 117 high net worth individuals, then they merged them with the VIPs, and it was just about 326 individuals. And the impact was not very significant, actually, after 5 or 6 years of implementation of this unit. I'm very excited about the new journey of URA. Before I get to the questions, Madam Mary, the truth is, when you hear, and what research actually tells us about the statistics about this group of individuals are very striking and actually disappointing at the same time. Because imagine when research tells us that in Africa, less than 5% of individuals are paying personal income tax. And in the developed countries, it is above 50%. But also, when you look at even these 5% that are contributing the income tax, it is mostly contributed by employees. For instance, in Uganda, we know that this income tax, personal income tax, when you come to personal income tax, it contributes roughly 20 or 20 to 25% of the revenue. But almost 70% of this is from employees. And the same case was also established in Rwanda, where still personal income tax was contributing about 24%, but over 90% was contributed by employees. Virtually nothing was coming from dividends, sale of shares, which are income streams of the rich. So, research also telling us that the extent of evasion is not about even implementing aggressive tax planning, but they are just evading, and we know this. You see, when you look in these other developed countries, for instance, when you go to UK, they say 0.5, the top 0.5 contribute 17%. The top 0.1% in Germany contribute 8%, and in the US, that the top 1% contribute 40%. And then when you come to African continent, there is something that was going on social media that in Africa, the presidents, the ministers, and the kings are the richest, but they don't appear on the list of large contributors. So there is really something that we should clearly label as a tax problem in Africa. Now, going to the question that I was asked on how should we identify and how should we define this? One, like my colleague and former boss, Sarah, shared, there is no universally accepted definition of who a high net worth individual is in the world. And therefore, countries should come up with country-specific definitions. The countries are different. A rich person in Uganda may not appear on the list when you come to Nairobi. A rich person in Nairobi may not appear on the list when we go to South Africa. You see some of us that came from villages. When you are in Kampala and you buy a car and you go to the village, you become a rich person there. So everyone celebrates you. But when you come to Kampala, your car may not even make sense. So countries should come up with country-specific definitions on who they think a high net worth individual is. Then the second consideration is that even within a country, it is very difficult or even impossible to come up with one unique definition that a rich person in Uganda is one with a net worth of so X millions or billion. Why? Because it is very difficult to get information about these people. At times, we get to know the owners. You see, Africa is a property economy. By this, I mean that the richer people become, the more assets they own. But it is impossible and very difficult, actually, to know who at times owns these assets. At times, we get to know who owns these assets when the people we knew that the owners die, and then the relatives are not even in the will, another person is in the will. At times, we also know that the owners are babies. The owners of these buildings are babies. So it is important to know that it is to define these people, you will need a multiple parameter criteria, looking at different items, loans, land transactions, cash in bank, etc., etc. So usually in Uganda, when we're defining this criteria, we grouped these into core parameters and non-core parameters. Now, what we meant by the core are those parameters whereby if you look at it, one parameter is enough to qualify this person as a high net worth individual, like being a shareholder in large companies. That was a core parameter. Land transactions above, I think, about 300,000 US dollar. That was a core parameter. Then we had the non-core. The non-core, and which is very important, that it also worked in HMRC, is the rich are known. We can hide about this, but we know the rich. The rich are known. You can even use publicly available information to know who the rich is. And interestingly, even in HMRC, they had information. They have integrated systems. But they also didn't know all the population, the entire population of who their rich are. They did a survey, a community survey, a survey. And they went identifying who is the rich here. And they identified 40,000 potential high net worth individuals. And when they came and started analyzing these individuals, they ended up with over 20,000. And some of the new people they identified were richer than those they knew. So the rich are known, we should identify them, and then we come and scrutinize this. Then, what should we do? Do I still have some minutes? So then what should we do to deal with this subject? I think there are so many recommendations, but in the short run, what I should say is, let us start. At times, it is just important to just start, and then we shall modify these things along the way. In fact, I should also say that let us try to bite, and then apologize afterwards. You see, what the CDT say that yesterday, someone was assessed, they picked 400, that is over 100,000 USD. That money is already in URA. That means Sarah apologized, but she's not going to return that money. So we can bite and apologize. The most important thing is that we need to start as a key step. Then the other important one, and which we saw in Uganda, is that it is important to have the support of management. This thing will start and rest on management. Because it is the officers that are assessed by the called CDT. If CDT said, sorry, and then started attacking the officers, that was going to be a dead deal. But she had to stand the ground that, sorry, we shall not do it again, but I'm sure they are going to do it again. They are even going to attack another. So this thing starts with management. And this is, we have seen this in URA. When this unit was being established, it was about management, in the identification and in the enforcement. In fact, even in the sensitization of this group, management was going there. And it was interesting to hear the same story, that Salah had to go to a golf club and wait for over an hour, a commissioner, to wait for that guy to come. So management must be at the center of this thing. And we also learned this. When URA was establishing the public sector office, you know, government has bad manners. In the sense that, you see public organizations, they are large taxpayers. They withhold pay, but they don't file. They withhold pay, they don't pay. Now, what helped URA to raise corrections from the public sector office is when URA got the support of the Minister of Finance. And the Minister of Finance said, if the organization does not file and pay, I will not release the budget. Now, the public sector office became the second largest contributor to revenue after the large taxpayers office. We have a paper about this. So it is important to have the management at a tax revenue authority level, but also more important, if you can get the support from the highest offices like the Minister of Finance, and even more important, this might be in the long run if we get support from the highest office like the executive. This worked in Georgia. In Georgia, it is a country that was struggling with a very low tax to GDP ratio of less than 10%. Today, it is above 25%. Why? Because the president said, I am filing my return. The ministers, you must file your return. And we have to open the government system to be transparent. And the tax to GDP ratio is above. I've been urging with URA before I left that even if we come up with a million strategies, if we don't address this real elephant, this tax to GDP ratio will not go above 15%. We shall sing about this thing forever. And then the other third major thing to think about is that technical versus soft skills, they are both needed, but as you're starting, the soft skills are more important. These are powerful people. You have to be very good at talking. You must have good relationship skills, good communication skills. That is more important. Then, lastly, in terms of the laws, we have done research, and these laws are really strong. They are charging provisions. All income sources are actually established. There are just a few weaknesses, actually, because when you look at the tax rates, for an employee, it is within 30 to 40%, for instance, in Uganda. Let me close, Mary. But then when you come at the income streams that these people are actually earning from, the rates are low. Look at the rate that we use to charge on dividends. It's about 15%, 5% in Rwanda. I don't know whether they addressed it. But then when you come to personal income tax, I'm not sure why we are discriminating between incomes. I'm an employer and you charge me a tax at 40, 30%, and then someone is gaining from rental income and is being taxed at 20. We should now discuss why discriminate between income. It's all called money. So we should start with that. Thank you so much, Mary.
Thank you so much, Ronald. That was very interesting. I'm about to open the floor for questions, for inputs, and but before I do that, I want to come back to you, Sarah. You heard what the panel said. Sarah, almost everybody talks about the need for exchange of information. You can't do it alone. The whole of government approach. Would you say that URA has achieved this? Because most of the countries and the people around the room seem to struggle. So getting this information, how are you managing to get it? Because you did give a whole list actually of the different departments that would be helpful in this. How are you managing that?
Thank you, Mary. Exchange of information is still a very difficult problem. It's still a problem, actually, because one, like I indicated to you, even when you write to the banks are very protective, because even if I was a banker, this is a very valuable taxpayer, is in the priority banking side, and URA, Uganda Revenue, the tax authority is asking for information which they know very well will not be very good with their customers. So it's really a whole difficult thing altogether. We are also looking at cross-border exchange of information. At least we now have the bill, the law signed this year on exchange of information, effective 1st July. That will be very good for us. But we will only start getting this information next year. So that is where we hope we will also benefit from. And then the other information is through social media and maybe the mobile money transactions and information through the Financial Intelligence Authority. Like I indicated, these high net worth individuals transact a cash economy. You see now what happens is that even with banks, as you go to transact in a bank these days, if you are going to deposit a lot of money, they will ask you for the source of this money, because there are certain amounts of money that has to be flagged to the Financial Intelligence Authority. And so there is a lot of scrutiny now when you bring this money, which is dirty money or illicit money, into the banking sector, trying to clean it up. So most of these people tend to hide this money through real estate, through other investments that may not be transparent when we want to attempt to tax. So all this is really a problem that remains to be addressed, and it's really a long journey that we have. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you very much, sir. And yes, Emmanuel, you want to add something quickly? I want to open up for the audience as well. So if you can be quick, I'll be really obliged.
Thank you, Mary. Just a quick addition. The point of exchange of information reminded me of another point which I think we need to add in response to the question of what we should do, especially in connection with our laws. When you look at the recommendations from the OECD, I think one of them is avoidance proofing, which essentially is about evaluating our laws if they are avoidance proof. We have a very important case to refer to from the experience of South Africa, the Mark Croc case, how they struggled to finally tax this person. I think it will offer important lessons to all of us. So that's the point I thought I would add. Thank you.
Thank you, Emmanuel. Giovanni, 1 minute.
I just wanted to, very quickly, because I also think it's important to leave space to the audience, give some very quick reflection on a few things that you all said that I thought were very important, and we didn't elaborate as much as we could have for the time. The first one was the point about the lack of need of dedicated legislation that was made by Emmanuel, which I think it's really true in many cases. The one aspect that might, at time in certain countries, require a bit of attention is whether individuals are obliged to file. At what point does an individual have to file an income tax return? Because there are countries in which individuals that earn income from particular sources are not required to file automatically, and that is something that should be given consideration. And the other thing that we've heard in some of the research we have done on this is that although it's usually not practiced to enshrine the criteria that we heard from both Ronald and Sarah in law, having the definition of a net worth individual appear as a schedule in your Income Tax Act forces Parliament to discuss it. And once Parliament discusses it, that can only be passed once enough political support has been gathered. So that is one of the logic that we've heard, especially in Sierra Leone, on why this might want to be enacted. The second thing you said, and it was about the informal sector, and I think that that is another common misconception, is that the informal sector is the small trader in the street. There are a lot of professionals that earn a lot of their income informally. There are lawyers that are paid with land without that ever being recorded. There are dentists that never file. So, the informal sector is not just a small petty trader. The informal sector is also a lot of the professionals that do not file. And that is something that really requires more attention, especially when one thinks about doing registration of the informal sector. And the final one is something that Ronald said, and it's about the fact that there's more evasion than tax planning at the moment. And I think that also is something we have picked up in our research. Because there is only partial enforcement of the existing legislation, a net worth individual often do not really have to engage in tax planning yet. But as soon as the revenue authority starts, such as in the case in the URA, then when enforcement picks up, they start engaging in tax planning. So that is also the logic to kind of be kept in mind. Start by enforcing what it is, but get ready for tax planning to become a thing.
Thank you so much, Giovanni. I want to open up the discussion because I'm sure there's one thing that we all agree on. This is a sector that is greatly undertaxed, and to improve compliance, it has to be taxed because it is unfair that those who have are actually the ones not being taxed. Talked about legislation, talked about building capacity and a proper skill set, many other things. I want to hear from the audience. Do you have questions? Do you have inputs? There's a hand at the back, sorry. Yes? I will take 3, we will respond, and then I'll take another set. So the back, Professor Ua, and Professor Van Zyl, in that order.
Ok, merci. Je suis Kogbede Yao Vidéo.
And Insta s'il vous plaît, let us please put on our headsets.
Ok.
Please
Ok.
proceed.
Ok, je disais que je suis Kogbede Yao Vidéo du Togo. Je voudrais d'abord remercier les panélistes pour la qualité de leur présentation et la qualité de la discussion, des discussions qui ont suivi. Et comme vous l'avez tous mentionné, cette problématique est vraiment importante au niveau de l'Afrique actuellement, surtout que l'Afrique, c'est le continent de l'avenir et que la croissance continue au niveau des agrégats macroéconomiques qui s'améliorent. Alors, ma question va s'adresser peut-être à la commissaire chargée des impôts nationaux de l'Ouganda. De par leur expérience, parce qu'au Togo, la tendance qui est en train de se dessiner peut-être, c'est de faire une segmentation plutôt territoriale. Donc, je voudrais poser la question à la commissaire de savoir, est-ce que l'expérience qu'ils ont eue, la centralisation des individus fortunés dans une unité donnée, section ou division, quel que soit son lieu de résidence, est bénéfique pour leur imposition, ou bien est-ce que la segmentation selon le territoire de résidence, le lieu de résidence, serait la meilleure approche? Est-ce qu'elle peut partager avec nous l'expérience qu'ils ont eue par rapport à cette segmentation-là? Territorialité ou bien centralisation des individus fortunés pour leur imposition, bien sûr, parce que tout commence par l'immatriculation et la segmentation. Quand on les immatricule, il faut qu'on les segmente pour qu'on puisse mieux les gérer. Merci.
Thank you, Togo. If we can keep it as brief as possible, Professor Ua is in the second row. Please keep your hand up, Prof, so that, okay.
Thank you, Chair. I just have my comments here are not necessary questions, but they are actually probable solutions. Now, we talked about the informal sector and the high net worth individual, how to improve the current system or the current status quo. I just have a few suggestions, or perhaps we could look at this aspect or perspectives. We are asking for individuals to pay tax. On the part of the government, to what level do we see the transparency level? Transparency, for me, is very, very important. And I think when the government is transparent on the taxes collected and how it is used, and persons out there see how it is used, it has what we call the boosting of the tax morale of the individuals. So transparency on the part of government is key. Secondly, there's need for reorientation of the minds of the people. This reorientation means you don't need to chase the police. Who is going to police the police? Who is policing the individuals? So there is need for us to have a reorientation, a new thinking, a new mindset. And that mindset will only come to light when there is transparency on the part of the government. The speaker talked about individuals having persons in government. I mean, it ought not to be so. This law should be applied generally. And the justice system should also, persons who are found wanting should also face the music. And so there's need for clear orientation. Thirdly, leadership by example. When persons out there who term themselves as persons who are in government don't show examples, then what are we doing? So definitely those at the lower cadre will also see for themselves. So that leader aspect should also be looked upon. It's a key area. Then fourthly, we talked about efficient reporting and disclosure. Disclosure means everything is made visible, and you can only attain efficient disclosure or reporting system when you have a good technology. We should look at a positive perspective to technology. This, in one of the presentations yesterday, some of these things came to light, and so we should look at the positive aspect of technology to ensure that these things are done with ease. And the last speaker talked about cross-border exchange. And if there's this cross-border exchange in terms of information flow, so there's no hiding point for any individual who feels he can pick from this country, take to this country to hide, and so I think it will help to a greater level. I mean, these are just mere probable solutions. Thank you.
Thanks, Prof. Professor Vanzil.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. My question is rather short. To what extent have you considered whistleblowing as a method of obtaining sufficient information to start your investigations against high net worth individuals? Because we know that capacity is an issue, that you simply do not have the manpower to go out and look around who's got Mercedes-Benzes, who are importing these luxury vehicles, who buys the luxury items, etc., etc. But then when I'm looking at an extensive whistleblowing program, considering how does your whistleblowing program work in the sense of protecting the whistleblower? Is there sort of a reward for the whistleblower? And again, coming back to the protection of the whistleblower, because we don't want a crocodile somewhere to be very happy when the whistleblower disappears. Yeah, so that's what I want you to perhaps consider is, to what extent can you employ a whistleblowing program to assist you in getting after these high network individuals?
Thank you so much. We got 2 questions, so I can take one more. There's one at the back.
Merci. Augustin CIA de la Côte d'Ivoire. J'ai des observations puis quelques recommandations. D'abord, la première observation, c'est que j'ai noté que la fiscalité des personnes physiques, telle que vous l'entrevoyez, ne concernerait que les personnes fortunées. C'est un gros problème en matière de justice fiscale, parce que l'impôt est une prestation pécuniaire qui est requise des particuliers à titre définitif et sans contrepartie pour les besoins du développement. Et l'impôt doit être juste. Alors, si on ne le réserve que pour des personnes fortunées, encore que la notion de personnes fortunées, on ne s'entend pas dessus, on a parlé d'1 milliard, de 2 milliards, de 3 milliards, je pense que l'impôt, chacun doit la payer en fonction de ses capacités contributives. Qu'on soit riche, ou peu riche, ou pauvre, dès lors qu'on a des revenus sur un territoire donné, eh bien, on devrait pouvoir payer ses impôts si la législation ne fait pas obstacle à cela. Ça, c'est la première préoccupation. La deuxième préoccupation, quel est le système fiscal dans lequel on est? En Côte d'Ivoire, et je crois que c'est le cas de la plupart des pays de l'UEMOA, on est dans un système déclaratif. C'est-à-dire que l'individu vient volontairement, selon les règles fiscales en vigueur, faire sa déclaration au niveau du fisc. À charge pour l'administration fiscale d'effectuer les contrôles et de voir si ces déclarations sont conformes avec les règles fiscales, ce que vous appelez conformité. À partir de cela, la législation met à la disposition de l'administration fiscale des outils juridiques pour collecter les informations sur tous les contribuables, qu'ils soient personnes physiques ou personnes morales, sans qu'aucune structure de l'État ne puisse lui faire une opposition quelconque. J'ai cru comprendre, dans les cas que vous avez évoqués, qu'au niveau des banques, il y a des difficultés à avoir ces informations. Mais non, les banques sont obligées de donner à l'administration fiscale toutes les informations dont elles disposent. Sinon, les banques sont sanctionnées et dans notre législation, il y a des sanctions qui sont très, 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 très fortes. Alors, aujourd'hui, avec le développement de la communication, de l'information et de la collecte des données, je suis surpris qu'on dise en Afrique en 2023 qu'on a des difficultés à collecter des informations sur des personnes physiques. Quand vous achetez un bien immobilier, c'est retracé. Quand vous achetez un véhicule, c'est retracé. Quand vous déposez de l'argent en banque, c'est retracé. Si vous êtes en dehors de ces structures, c'est le rôle de l'administration fiscale de collecter, de rechercher les informations que les contribuables tendent à cacher. Si ces informations passent par des circuits officiels, on ne peut pas dire qu'on a des difficultés pour les avoir. C'est une question d'organisation des administrations à collecter et à traiter les informations dont elles disposent. Ensuite, je viens d'entendre que sur les dénonciations, notre système fiscal est fait de telle sorte que toutes les personnes qui disposent des informations, l'administration fiscale a le pouvoir de les collecter là où ces informations se trouvent. Enfin, sur cette question de biens qui sont au nom des enfants, des petits-enfants ou des arrière-petits-enfants, ou des biens qu'on cache. Mais écoutez, ce n'est pas propre à l'Afrique. Quand on regarde les informations fiscales, même en Europe, tout le monde cherche à cacher le bien dont il dispose. Il y a eu des scandales il n'y a pas longtemps. Les personnes physiques et les personnes morales...
Can you please summarize?
Oui, je vais m'arrêter là. C'est ce que vous voulez me dire. Je n'ai pas bien entendu puisque je n'ai pas le traducteur dans mon écouteur. Comment? Oui, je résume pour dire que toutes les administrations fiscales, aujourd'hui, ont les outils pour collecter les informations. Imposer les personnes physiques, ce n'est pas une difficulté. Je vous remercie.
Thank you so much indeed. We have a couple of questions for you, Sarah. You'll go first. And then, and as you speak, please also give whatever message you want to give the audience, because after that, we're really running short of time. We'll conclude. Sorry? Okay. So the first question to you, Sarah, was regarding the first question to you was, the question that was asked by Professor Van Zyl was around whistleblowing. You got that? Oh. And how you're managing the whistleblowing sector. Did you get it, Ben? The first one. Oh, okay. So we'll get Ronald to address the first one, and Giovanni will also complement.
I think I wanted to just clarify on the first question, if I got it clearly. They were asking about segmentation, whether we should put this at the center with a centralized office or leave it within different territories. In the case, for instance, in Uganda, where we have taxpayers managed in different tax offices, should they stay there or we need to centralize them there? I think that was the first question. Yeah.
Thank you, Ronald. I will pick some questions. I think those that I haven't, Ronald will help me.
Yeah.
Yeah. You said segmentation? Yeah, thank you. On segmentation is very effective because one, you have a one-point office, a section, sitting all these individuals in one place. The importance of this is that you have the same team with handling all their issues in one place. Because before that, we had them spread all over. And it would really create inconsistencies even in communication. Now, this particular team, we train them on how to communicate to these high-value clients, on how to approach them. So there is a seamless way in which we have to approach them, and this has helped. And then the fact that they are relationship persons now for each of them makes it very, very easy. Like I told you, if you visit them, they feel very valued, and so we do those visits, engagements, and so that when it comes to engaging them for tax, it's already a softened ground. The other one was...
Ronald will handle the second one. Thank you.
The other one was on, I think from Professor, where he was asking about the level of transparency in government. And his issue is that, yes, we are looking for these people to pay, but is government actually transparent in its transactions? Is it that trusted? The answer, I think, is almost a known fact, but maybe...
He actually wasn't asking a question. He was saying that government needs to look at that. So for him, that transparency then leads to compliance, because everybody says that, you know, everybody's paying their right fare of taxes. So that wasn't a question. But there was a question from Professor Van Zyl. Did you get that question?
I didn't.
It is on whistleblowing,
Yes.
and he's saying, how effective can the whistleblowing policy, how can we benefit from the whistleblowing if we, for instance, use whistleblowers to give information to URA? Can that help to effectively get more information about them and to tax them?
Whistleblowing is good, but may not really be very effective. It can only be effective if the whistleblower comes with the information. Remember, we said tax is about fact, that is the evidence, and then now the law. Remember, in taxation, we look at the potential litigation that comes, because the taxpayer also has a right to object, to do litigation, to appeal on some of the taxes that you raise. So we must be very, very smart in the way we get this information, sieve it. But also, the whistleblower is a very good way in which we are able now to note that, this person now has all this information that we may not be knowing. So we take time now to do further investigation, and once we have that information concrete, then we take on by doing the assessments and then following up with the collection. I think I will also give my parting shot to thank all of you for being a very attentive audience, and once again to thank Ataf and the Africa Research Network for organizing this. As African revenue tax administrators, we have to support each other to mobilize this revenue and to make sure our countries are independent in terms of revenue support. Thank you.
Yes, please.
There were a lot of very good points being made, so I'll just pick up on a couple for the interest of time. I think the one thing that was mentioned that's quite important is the role of technology, and I think that one of the things that you know, more and more government services have been digitized across the continent, and revenue authorities usually are amongst the first government institutions that get to have very good IT systems, and as other government bodies become, you know, more digitized, there's going to be more and more information available to the revenue authority, but that also requires the revenue authority to invest massively on data security, because this is one of the things that in our experience as top commercial banks sharing data the most, is that they have a duty to protect the data from their clients. So investing in data security system on the revenue authority could be important to ensure that there's more willingness from the private sector to also share data. On the segmentation, I would just simply add one thing very quickly, which is that if the high net worth individual unit is established from the beginning under the LTO, the large taxpayer office, that could could lead to the deprioritization of individuals. So I think that even in the URA case, it has been a journey that led it back to the large taxpayer office. But if large taxpayers units are usually looking under corporations, then they will deprioritize individuals. So it is important, especially at the beginning, to create task force that do exactly the job that we heard of going to pick the individuals from all the various units across the country that might be managing them, and then first centralize all individuals into one unit, and then that could be placed under the LTO, could be placed under the public sector, but there has to be a bit of work on that from the start. I am very curious to come to Ivory Coast if it is this easy to access information, because that is not the experience that I have had in working in other countries, so we should definitely come over and see how you guys have managed to sort that out. And I think that the final thing before leaving would be, again, thanking the Atr and stressing the role of sensitization and education. That is something that we have also heard. Some of these individuals do not know what their tax obligations are. They are not engaging in tax planning. They simply don't comply because of ignorance of tax laws. And because of the issue of transparency that was also mentioned, because of the importance of seeing tax paying as a service provision, like sensitization and education plays a key role, and civil society can also play a key role. Revenue authorities tend to often have a top-down approach. CSO can help a lot, especially for high net worth individuals.
Thanks, Giovanni.
Thanks.
Emmanuel, 1 minute, please, quickly.
Thank you, Mary. I want to say that I think the puzzle is solved. Let's go ahead and make our attempt. The rationale is clear. The things to be done are visible. And we have the Ugandan model and the South African experience, two of our countries which have been able to go first to learn from. Let's go and make our attempt. Thank you very much, Mary.
Thank you, Emmanuel. And Ronald?
Yeah, thank you, Mary. 3 quick things in less than a minute. One, on segmentation, I think it's the way to go. It worked in ATO, Australia Tax Office. It worked in HMRC. SARS had a unit between 2009 and 14, disbanded it, I think, after it was restructuring. But again, it realized that the unit was more effective, so it re-established it in 2021. So I think having a special office is very important. But also, it's effective because once you have these people there, the officers, they have a target. And because they have a target, they will have to hit that target if they have to perform in the appraisal. So they end up at least collecting some revenue. On transparency, according to World Bank, the framework for improving compliance, it has 3 broad channels, which is facilitation, enforcement, and trust. And what we saw in Uganda, because we did this assessment still, is that revenue authorities have actually done so well in terms of facilitating compliance. They have educated taxpayers, they're automating systems. Where the problem is on trust. So trust is still a big problem. When you look at the Afrobarometer statistics, people don't trust these governments, by the way. And they also don't trust, even revenue authorities actually don't trust it that much. When you look at the indicators I was sharing with you one time. Lastly, and which is very important to me and very exciting, is that Ataf has opened a very big research program for taxing high net worth individuals. I'm super excited in this because I think almost 8 countries have expressed interest. We are coming to do these studies. I look forward to this. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much indeed to the panelists. And I want to say that we have quite a number of things to take away. Richard, thanks for obliging me. I'm almost done. We have agreed that this is a sector that we need to tax, and that one of the things that will lead to compliance is if everybody is paying their right share, even if they are VVIPs. The second thing is that legislation and policy must be in place, and it must be clear, and it must be enforceable. The third was that there must be proper skill sets, and people must understand the individuals and understand what the definition of the high net worth individuals are. And then, of course, the all of government approach and need to exchange information was seen as a key component that would help. And of course, the external exchange of information where this can be done externally using technology in automatic exchange of information, where financial information is provided at individual level. And then, of course, we all agreed that technology helps in this regard and that we should use it to try and tax this category. And to use Emmanuel's words, the puzzle is solved. So let's go and tax these high net worth individuals. I thank you for your kind attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary, and your panel. Can I request the panel to remain on the stage? Can you stand up for a quick photo? The photographers, please. The photographers, please. A quick photo. And thereafter, we'll have a small token for each one of you in memory of your contribution here today. Can we please stand up for the group photo? Remember to smile. Thank you. Can I now have please, can we have the trophies coming here, please? Quickly, quickly. Can I invite the chairperson of Atrn? The first one goes to Mrs. Mary Baine, the chairperson of the panel. The next one is for Sarah. The next one is Professor Giovanni. Next is Mr. Emmanuel Masalo. And last but not least, Mr. Waiswa. I request that you take another photo with your mementos with you. And the chairperson of Atr, can you pose for the photo with them? Okay. Mr. Waswa, please hold it properly. Hold it properly, just like the others. Yes, like that. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the end of our plenary in this room. And as we go for break, which will take us 20 minutes, it's now 11:34, so we expect that by 11:55, we should be able to convene in the various rooms for the parallel sessions. Room 1 will be here in the main plenary, and the topic will be promoting sustainable development in Africa. Room 2 will be Ruaha, which is in the second corridor, not the first corridor here, the second corridor. And the topic there is the role of technology in taxation. And room 3 will be Selu and Mikumi, and it will be, the topic will be other taxation issues. So you may decide what you're interested in, and if you're more than one, it would be good to at least go in various rooms to pick whatever you can pick from each of those discussions that will go on there. With those few remarks, can I now release you for the break? The tea is available, or you can even have a relaxation while you prepare yourself to go to the various rooms for the panel sessions. Oh, I just forgot to say one thing. That will take us up to lunchtime. And after lunch, the same rooms will have the following topics. If not, take note of this because we may not have this announcement again. After lunch, we'll have in room 1, emerging issues in taxation in room 1, which will be here. In room 2, we'll have taxation on the extractive sector. And in room 3, again, emerging issues in taxation. I wish you a good break. Thank you.